Please like and comment below and subscribe and share for more first-person encounters.
UFOs exit electric blue light over Miami. I was outside my house when I saw this star-like object that caught my attention because it was emitting a bow wave in front of it. There was another ship behind it following the main bigger one, and then the bigger one did this huge spray-like bow wave in mid-air. Looked just like the China sighting in 2010. As soon as this happened, the other ship behind it divided into two smaller ships and continued to follow the bigger one. After a while they were out of our sight, but there was an electric bright blue cloud in the sky, much more different than the rest, that disappeared a little bit after the ships were gone.
Follow-up to UFOs exit electric blue light over Miami, Florida. I took one look at the photos of a blue cloud-type light over Miami, and immediately thought of a similar light over Birmingham, Alabama in the late 70s. The anomaly was witnessed by much of the populace, and was covered by local news stations. The light occurred in the western sky just as the sun set below the horizon. It was mesmerizing. Our whole subdivision walked outside and watched it. After a little hoopla, a spokesperson stated it was a weather balloon that burst in the atmosphere. I was just a preteen at the time, so I don't remember where the balloon explanation came from. I would imagine it was an Air Force release. There is an Air Force facility that shares facilities at the Birmingham Airport. 117 Air Refueling Wing. It was an F-4 fighter reserve wing at the time. Maxwell Air Force Base is 1.5 hours away in Montgomery. After the balloon announcement, the news never pursued the subject any further. Now a couple of questions arise. First, I wonder if anyone ever got a photo of the light over Birmingham. The press didn't cover the story until the light had subsided. Second, does anyone have a photo of a weather balloon bursting in the atmosphere? I have found a few online, and nothing compares to the Miami light or the light over Birmingham. I ask the latter question because I have a feeling that a weather balloon may be used for an explanation, if an explanation is given at all. If I had $1 for every time a weather balloon was blamed. Sincerely, BN.
Illinois driver follows low hovering lights near Urbana. I saw lights hovering over highway. I thought it was an airplane, but it didn't move as I came up on it. At 12:25 a.m. August 15, coming home from work, I turned from US 130 onto US 150 heading east, leaving Urbana, and as I came over a very small ridge, I saw bright white lights directly over the highway about 4 miles away. I thought it strange to see something that bright and low. Well, I thought it was just a small plane following the highway and expected it to turn and go on its way, but it just stayed over the road. I traveled 1 mile and was going to make my turn to go home, but the lights was still there and seemed to be not moving, so I stayed on highway and thought I would go to next crossroads in Mayview, Illinois, just to satisfy my curiosity, and would only be a mile out of my way, and see why this light wasn't moving. Well, I got to my second crossroads, and the lights were still there, but it moved south a little off highway, and I thought to myself, this is really strange, so instead of turning off I continued down the highway slowly, and I noticed the lights had moved south, as I came upon an elevator called Full Siding, just a mile east of Mayview, just 200 yards to the south of the highway. I was looking out my front windshield and saw two white lights on the ends, and in between I saw violet lights, red lights, blue lights, and green lights. Some were blinking rapidly, some slowly, and some stayed constant. The lights were about 50 to 70 feet long, and about 150 to 200 feet in the air, and about 200 to 300 yards away. Now this where I started acting strange. As I was watching it, I thought I will stop and get out of my truck and get a detailed look at this, because I noticed no other cars coming, so I could stop right there and get out. But something in my head said, no, you don't want to get out of the truck. So I said to myself, I'm gonna pretend I don't see this thing, and I'm gonna go to the next road and turn around, get my phone camera out and take a picture of this thing. But when I turned around, it was gone, and also this whole time there was no noise. When I came back to where I saw it, I started scanning the sky and saw the same lights had moved back to the southwest, and they were gone. Next day I got on Google Maps and located the area where I saw it, and saw a private grass landing strip, and thought to myself, okay, someone had something up, so I called the person who owns it and told him what I saw, and he said he flies small single-engine planes, but it landed before sundown, and he said he and no one else would have anything that big in there or be flying after sundown. Also on Saturday, September 8th, I saw the same lights from my house at around 9:30 p.m. They were about 3/4 of a mile east of my house, which would be 2.5 miles north of where the previous encounter happened. This light was about 100 to 150 feet in the air, moving very slowly south. I yelled at my wife that I am looking at the same object I saw 3 weeks before, and told her I'm getting in the truck with camcorder and binoculars and get a video. But when I came out the house, I could see this light fly away at high speed southeast, and was over St. Joseph in a matter of seconds.
UFO light show and helicopters. I was 15 years old living in Dallastown, Pennsylvania. It was a Saturday evening. Myself and several friends were walking along the back streets north of the main road with a great view of the hills on the other side of the valley towards York. I don't recall what got our attention, but we watched several bright lights hovering and slowly moving around over the hills on the horizon. At first we thought they were just distant airplanes with their landing lights on. But, after watching them for over 30 minutes, we realized they were flying the same pattern over and over again. The larger, brighter white light would fly in slowly from the west to the east and hover in a certain spot. A dimmer, smaller light would come in from the east to west more quickly and at a higher altitude, then fly slowly as it got closer to the first light. At some point when they got too close, the larger, brighter light would fly off very quickly back to the west, and the dimmer, smaller light would shoot straight up and disappear. The cycle lasted about 2 minutes each time, with about 5 minutes in between. We watched this continue over and over again. It went on so long that we had time to get more neighborhood kids out there, and even run into my house and get a camera from my mother, who didn't care as much about it as she did getting to sleep for work the next day. At this point there are about 6 to 7 of us kids watching these lights replay the same cycle repeatedly, when 3 low-flying helicopters flew over our town heading towards the lights. They were close enough when they flew by that we could tell they were the big kind with 2 rotors on top, but since it was dark I couldn't tell you what color they were. Each had a strobe on it which we could see as they went over the hills and formed a triangle around the area where the lights were. The helicopter strobes hovered there about 10 minutes and the lights stopped coming, so we all got disappointed thinking they scared them off. But, just as suddenly as before, the 2 lights started their cycle again. We took a bunch of pictures, most of hat rims, fingers, and friends joking around. The only one that turned out was just a blob of light. About an hour and a half after all of this started, it ended with a final cycle of the pattern that was different from the rest. This time, with the strobes from the 3 helicopters framing the scene, the brighter, bigger light came in slowly from the west heading east and came to rest at a hover in its usual spot. The smaller, dimmer light came in more quickly from the east heading west and at a higher altitude. As it got closer to the brighter light, it slowed down. Then, we saw a small pulsing red light come out of the dimmer light. The small pulsing red light connected with the larger, brighter one. At this point the dimmer light shot straight up as usual. But, when the pulsing red light connected with the bright light, sparks like fireworks started shooting out of it, and it darted off down and west. It was very bright and startling. All of us jumped back. Some had the instinct to run away a few steps. One girl even fell backwards. We watched for another hour, but the lights never came back, and the helicopter strobes eventually left. The following Monday, there were stories in the local paper about people in the area spotting the bright light, with fireworks coming out of the back shooting through the sky. They were dismissed as meteor sightings. The thing that never sat well with me was, the sightings in the paper matched the description of how the bright light looked at the end of the light show, but the witnesses saw it on Sunday around 5:15 p.m. What we saw was on Saturday around 7:30 p.m. I can't explain what we saw that night, and although I looked many times, I never saw anything like it again. I still have several newspaper clippings from that weekend today. Lights at night. Our closest neighbors with kids lived a quarter mile down the road, and one of the kids was camping with me and maybe my brother in our side yard, which was about a half-acre piece of land behind our 3-car detached garage, and then bordered on the side by 2 large grain bins at least 20 feet tall and an old barn. I woke up in the middle of the night because I saw a really bright light shining into our tent. At first, I thought maybe a farmer had pulled up near the barn to turn around and had their bright light shining on the tent. I wanted to see who it was, so I crawled out of the tent, and as soon as I was out of the tent the light was gone. It wasn't like someone pulled away or even flipped the lights off. It just wasn't there. So, I got outside and walked onto the road and didn't see any cars. It was really dark outside and I was heading back to the tent. But, before I got to the tent I saw several bright spherical lights. If I had to estimate, I'd say they were between a softball and bowling ball in size. There were several colors, although right now I only recollect red and yellow. Initially they were hovering above me in the tent, about as high as the grain bins. Then they began to move. Sometimes they were in a circular pattern, and then sometimes 3 would form a triangle maybe 5 to 6 feet long. I don't recall how many lights there were, but I want to say it was around 5. So, they would be in the triangular circle formation, and then suddenly break from each other, and just move randomly all over the place, always above me, but in a lot of directions, before going back to their pattern together.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.